A few weeks back, out of the blue, Gary McKinnon reached out to me. Many of you will instantly recognize him as the most famous computer hacker in the world for over a decade. What you're about to hear was our first conversation, and given our colorful pasts, we decided to hit the record button so others could enjoy seeing two old-school hackers coming together for the first time. And I'm so glad we did, because unsurprisingly, it turned out to be an incredibly interesting and entertaining conversation. So hang on to your hats, because this is going to be a wild ride.
Here's your list of charges. You hacked into the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Department of Defense, and NASA, amongst other things. Why?
I was in search of suppressed technology, laughingly referred to as UFO technology. I think it's the biggest kept secret in the world because of its comic value. But it's a very important thing. We've got old age pensioners can't pay their fuel bills. We've got countries being invaded to get award oil contracts to the West. And meanwhile, secretive parts of the secret government are sitting on suppressed technology for free energy.
Well, let's hope Zoom saves this. It'd be a shame if it didn't.
Yep. I could... Oh, no, I think... Well, it should be fine. It says it's recording, so... Let's trust in Zoom.
Trust in Zoom. Yes.
Yeah. So, what's happening with me is I was approached by two guys, one of whom works for Bertelsmann Group, which is apparently huge. I'd never heard of them before. They own Random House Publishing and Penguin Books. And some music streaming platform I'd never heard of, but apparently it's pretty major. And they asked me if I want to do a podcast, audio only. And the initial thing was maybe about hacking, UFOs, maybe even mental health because of the whole Asperger's diagnosis, stuff like that. And one of them had contacts in Spotify and Audible. And Audible was the first one to come back. And Audible say they're interested. And Audible are huge, obviously. And but Audible says they like to do multi-part things and focus on one story and 2, 3, however many parts it takes. But they also said we want something that's pretty major that no one's heard about. Which is, how the hell do you do that? And obviously in different countries, like people in the UK might not have heard of you. I know a lot of people in America haven't heard of me because it wasn't in the American press.
Well, most of America's not heard of me either, ever. Right. well, they did back in the mid '80s, and then it just vanished into obscurity. I don't know if you know. Did you go to the Wikipedia page? And no. If you go to the list of computer criminals on Wikipedia, there's a little blurb in there on me, okay. And then there's a table at the bottom, and you're on the table, and Julian Assange is on the table, and Kevin Mitnick, and I'm on there, but I'm the only one that doesn't even have a link. There's no Wikipedia page for me. Up until this last year, I never even gave an interview on the subject. So it's something that, and also some people are like, well, they'd find out a little bit and they'd go looking for information. There was no information until I started to put out information. And the main reason for that was that the digital archives for newspapers didn't begin until I think it was 89. And my case was in 85 and completed in 86. So basically it hit the papers a bunch, and it hit the nightly news as well, which I've never been able to track down any clips from when, because it was on national news once or twice, and Dan Rather or Peter Jennings, I can't remember which one of the mentioned the case, so I haven't never been able to track down any of those clips. But I saved all the newspaper articles, and I had them all. So, and I had the dates and the references, so I was able to put that information on Wikipedia. And I thought maybe I would start getting contacted by people wondering, because I'm actually, if you go to Wikipedia, I'm at the top of that table, so I'm actually the first one on the list, which is really bizarre. So people just haven't quite noticed it yet. And then I'm in the final stages of editing my book, and I'm planning on self-publishing. I decided not to go the publishing route because I didn't want to wait 2-3 years for it to go through the pipeline. I also wasn't eager for them to take 90% of the winnings if there were any. And they also don't guarantee any, that they're going to even market it. So they're going to take 90%, and they don't promise marketing, and they're expecting a lot of the authors nowadays to do a lot of the footwork. So I thought that's kind of lousy. And then they won't even talk to you anyway unless you have an agent. So the agent takes 15% of your 10%. And I thought, that's a lousy deal. So I'll just self-publish, but I hate marketing and I don't like sales. And so I know that if I'm going to self-publish, I have to do a lot of footwork to get it out there. And so I've just dragged my feet for 40 years, 35 years. Well, I'm a bit of a procrastinator when it comes to this particular subject. So...
Wow. But yeah, self-publishing is a good route.
Yeah. I wanted the final creative, say. I didn't want some editor to butcher a bunch of it and decide what they thought was important and what wasn't. So last year I put together a Kickstarter campaign because I figured if I could just get a chunk of cash for a bit of marketing and to get it through the editing process and, get a final marketable product, that would kind of light a fire under my butt to get it done. And I put together, did you see that little video clip I sent you? It was like a 4-minute video clip. Yeah. So I spent a bunch of time putting that together, and then I didn't, like I said, I don't like marketing or sales. So I basically hardly did anything to promote the Kickstarter campaign. It got to about 50% funding and didn't fund for the rest of it. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll just keep plugging away.
In February 1985, an 18-year-old Kirkland, Washington man pled guilty to 4 counts of computer trespass. The defendant was accused of gaining illegal access to 4 large Seattle area firms. Would you state your name, please?
My name is Mike Wilkerson. Usually they have the way it's set up is you dial in on one line and it calls you back on another so that you can't. It's supposed to be the ultimate security. But what you do is you break into Cosmos and find out all of the phone numbers that company owns, and you call it until you find the 2 that are hooked up to data. And then you get the callback modem and you set up call forwarding on that line so it call forwards to your home number. That takes a lot of work, but you have this invulnerable feeling. You just don't think you're gonna get caught. You ask any hacker out there that hasn't been caught yet if he thinks he's gonna get caught, and he'll tell you no. And if they tell you yes, it's because somebody close to them just recently got busted, and they have a feeling of being watched.
Whether you're curious about the 80s hacking scene and some of its most infamous characters, or if you care to indulge in a bit of nostalgia for the early days of computing, or if you just simply like to kick back with a light-hearted coming-of-age tale, then this book is for you. But now it's time. I feel, and just the synchronicity of you reaching out to me on my YouTube channel, which is completely unrelated, I was like, because the only interview I've ever given was with a friend of mine named Andreas Exertus, and he's got a YouTube channel as well, and he's interviewed a lot of really amazing people, and so I thought, and he's like. He's in like 32 or something like that. And so he's really young, but he's such an amazing mind. And he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of everything media and computers and tech and everything you can imagine from my era all the way through to now. And so he knows way more about hacking history, and he knew all about you. He was the one who brought you up in the interview that I did with him. And
the guy on the top left, right? Yeah, on the screen.
The top left.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but no, there's an interview that I did with him it's almost 2 hours on my YouTube channel that Stellium 7 for anyone watching, if this ever gets published. And that was the only interview that I ever gave up until that point, and that was just last year. So it's kind of hacking's best kept secret, I suppose you could say.
Well, I'm sure that if this whole Audible thing, comes through, it might take a few months. We can put a link to your trailer or a link to your book or publicize somehow. And I don't know how much I'm going to get paid. We haven't even got that far discussing pay, but I'll gladly give you a percentage of what I get for taking the time to relate the story and fill me in and help me do the podcast.
Yeah, well, it'd be a lot of fun. And I have one or two contacts from the old days that might be fun to talk to, people who were, most people, when they think about hacking, you're an old school hacker in their minds, right? Because we're talking around the time of 9/11. But I went to jail for hacking in '86.
Yeah, slightly older techniques back then, blue boxing and Captain, what's his name with the whistle?
These didn't exist back then. It was all command line and hunt and peck, and so times have changed. But it was interesting hearing aspects of your story, because obviously the media presented you like you were the greatest tech genius that had ever been, right? And they did something similar with me. They had, so the media has a vested interest in selling papers, and then the authorities have a vested interest in making us sound as dangerous as possible, so that they can whip up a frenzy of fear and justify,
exactly
greater regulation. So, but boy, you paid a hell of a lot bigger price than I did. That's for sure.
Oh man, yeah. In my country, under the Computer Misuse Act, it would have been 6 months in prison at the very most. And I was told I'd probably just get some community service, cleaning the streets for a few weeks.
Right.
And then
for first time offender, no priors, right? You had never done anything.
Yep, nothing at all.
How old were you when you got busted?
36.
Oh, okay. So you were literally twice the age I was when I got busted.
Right.
Exactly twice the age.
I should have known.
I got busted 2 weeks after I turned 18.
Oh wow!
Lucky. Seen as an adult in the eyes of the law, and I was anything but an adult at that point.
Yep. Yeah, I was pretty childish myself, even at the age of 36. It was I don't. Well, after the Asperger's diagnosis, some of that made sense, even though I don't really agree with all those labels. They said that you were on like a truth crusade, which apparently is quite common in people, with that syndrome. But I think there's a lot of people I've worked with in IT that are like that. We're very logical, methodical. If we have got a passion, we're very singular, almost tunnel vision. So that's just what happened to me. I really wanted to find out the truth about the UFOs. And having found out that Windows networks were rife amongst the military and government, I just wrote a Perl script that scanned for blank passwords, or the password being password or admin. No computer genius at all,
So basically, what year was that you got caught?
2002.
2002. So from 85 to 2002, that's 17 years. In 17 years, Microsoft learned not a damn thing.
Yep, same NT kernel.
Right.
Windows for Workgroups
because I got into this, because I was charged with 4 companies. I'd gotten into a lot more computers than the 4 I was charged with, but the 4 were Microsoft, Sunstrand, Kenworth Trucking, and a subsidiary of Boeing.
Wow.
And so Sunstrand were manufacturing the black box flight recorders that were in the airplanes. I don't know if they're still the ones making those, but and everyone knows who Microsoft is and was at the time. But with Microsoft, it was a VAX 11785 system.
Whoa.
And I got in with a basic system password. So it was, systest was the admin account. It was one of the extra admin accounts that was installed with the operating system. So most of the admins, I don't know what they were using. I can't remember. It's been so long, but probably admin. And they would, of course, change their passwords. But they were completely unaware that there were other accounts that were also in with the system that, they had full system privileges. So I got in with a basic password with full privileges. You got in with just blank passwords and password, which obviously worked all too often back then.
Yeah.
So the IT guys also want to make you look a lot better than you might have been, right?
Yep.
Because they don't want to look like total idiots that didn't bother to even check the manual before they turned on the system and put it online.
Yep.
So that's funny. I was reading the Wikipedia entry for you today. And they're talking about 700,000 in damages for these all these systems that you broke into. And in the interview I was listening to, you were breaking down like how much that would have had to be per system, and but ironically, if you just think about like, okay, all those computers, and we're talking military contractors, and how much money should they have spent making sure that they had top security so that somebody even with far greater skills could never have hoped to get in?
Yeah,
they should have spent millions and millions on that.
Yeah, firewalls,
They got off light with you. 700,000. That's not even what they should have paid the programmers to keep it from happening in the first place. So I find the whole thing ridiculous when you start to look at the numbers and the charges and.
Oh, it's crazy. As you were saying earlier, they love to inflate it and make you look like the world's greatest evil.
Yeah, I had both sides. Because this was in Seattle that I got busted. I was literally a stone's throw from. I could walk in 10 minutes to Microsoft's headquarters. So I was literally digging through trash cans, looking at papers and stuff like that.
Dumpster diving.
And Bill Gates lived just a stone's throw from there as well. And what did I bring that up? What were we talking about before? I just lost my train of thought.
I do that a lot. Microsoft.
It'll come back to me in a minute. But So I was talking about the newspapers. So on one side they were making me out to be this cute, innocent, kid who was on a high-tech joyride, that was just having a good time. And then the other paper, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, had to take a different tact, right? So they made me out to look like this kid that was really dangerous, and you could see it in the photos they chose too. Because when I went in for the arraignment, they had they had, they didn't know who I was. They didn't know anything about me until I finally went in for the arraignment. And then they could get pictures. And that was when it really exploded, because I was somewhat photogenic at that time also, and had more hair. And so the Seattle Times made me out to be like this innocent computer whiz that could do things that even the system operators couldn't do, and then the other guys were like, yeah, he could do things even the system operators couldn't do, and you should be very afraid. And so they'd pick these pictures of me that that looked more sinister and kind of like, oh, this kid doesn't look so innocent, So it was interesting to see that dynamic, and I'm sure you experienced way more of that, right? I mean,
totally.
There must have been thousands and thousands of articles and clippings. And,
you'd go for an interview, and they'd want you in a dark room by a keyboard. And after that happened to me twice, I said, no, I'm not doing that anymore, because it's that depiction, isn't it? The evil, lonesome hacker at his keyboard, dark and lonely. Yeah.
Well, and I was an innocent looking young kid. You were 36. So you were clearly in it for the money or the, whatever in the eyes of the people who see hackers as these evil people,
political, subversive.
My case was right at literally the turning point where legislation was being created for hacking. It didn't exist at that point. So there were other hackers that went to jail before me, but they went to jail for things like fraud, perhaps espionage, those sorts of things, because there were no laws on the books governing this kind of technology yet. And the prosecuting attorney that was assigned to my case happened to be the co-author of the legislation that I was being prosecuted under.
Oh my God.
Lucky me. So he, you could say he had a vested interest in getting a conviction.
Slightly.
And because the law had just passed, there was one other person prosecuted under the new legislation before me, and I think he got off with probation, or it was minor, and it hardly really made the papers. I don't even remember exactly what his offense was, but I was the first one that they nabbed that they actually had something on and they could run with it. And because up until that point, the standard operating procedure was the companies would like, we don't want people to know about this. Hey, you want a job? That was how it was done, or they would just kind of sweep it under the carpet. And so they were really trying to send a message to people like me, youth, but not just youth, but others, that this is not something you want to do. This is very, very dangerous, and we're gonna go after you if you do this. And so the law that passed was made it a felony offense if they could, for computer trespass in the first degree, which was intrusion with intent to commit fraud. In other words, you wanted to steal something. You were there because you wanted intellectual property, or wanted to do damage or something like that. And I can understand that they wanted to do that, because you want there's so many delicate systems that are controlling a lot of stuff that they don't want people just toying with. And so the prosecutor basically offered me, initially in a plea bargaining, he was trying to get me to go with felony offenses, like to plea out for felony. And then he said he would go for no jail time.
Right.
If I accepted the felonies. And then I found, okay, I'll never be able to vote, can't do military time. Not that bothered me any. And then the fines could be up to $5,000 per charge, which, okay, 20 grand. That was a lot of money back then, because there were 4 computer companies that I was charged with. But then also the other thing was jail time was up to 5 years per offense. So he, as a prosecuting attorney, he could make whatever recommendations he wanted, but ultimately it was the judge's, final say what the penalties would be. So even though he was promising no jail time, the judge could have said, well, I think this is so terrible what you did, we're going to lock you up for a year or 5 or something. And I'm like, forget that. And so eventually we plea bargained it down, but he was going for jail time and he got it in the end. And so I was like you, I thought it was going to be like, don't do that again. And you're on probation for 6 months or a year or something like that. And didn't work out that way.
Shit. So what happened?
Yeah. Well, it went on the court case took about a year to finish. And I pled guilty in the end. Initially, I pled innocent and explained why in the book that it was advantageous just to try and buy a little time also and get things in order for our case. And then pled guilty to gross misdemeanors. So basically, even that was ridiculous if you look at it, because that's the same as like assault and battery, gross misdemeanor. And so I could have literally like broken into your home, beat you over the head, and taken your computer, and it would have been the same as slipping in through the phone lines and doing no damage to your computer and just looking at what was there. And so I already at 18, I was losing a lot of faith in the American justice system, because there were so many things that were screwy when it came to what they
it's all very familiar.
Yeah. So I ended up getting fined. I had a couple weeks in jail. That was actually later reduced out of kindness from the judge, and I go into the reason for that a little bit. So, but I did do a whole week.
What was that like?
Well, they were obviously very worried about me going into like the King County jail, because there's some pretty hardened criminals there who would have found me cute, I'm sure.
God.
And I was terrified of the prospect. And so what they ended up doing was there was a smaller jail that was south of Seattle that was basically like a holding cell for people that were in on DUIs, drunk driving offenses and that sort of thing, nonviolent criminals who weren't, there's no reason they should have been in county, but they had to do their time. And so that was where they decided to put me. But it was also more like a hotel, because you actually had to pay to stay there. And so that was why the judge eventually reduced it, because I had the monetary fines already, and there was the risk that I might lose the job that I had at the time, because I had I was going to be gone for a couple of weeks, and so then he's just like, okay, we'll drop it to half that.
Oh, fantastic!
And then I actually ended up getting to get out during the day to go to work. So basically I spent a week of nights in the jail cell, but it was a proper jail, like in the sense that like the thick steel door like this, it went clonk, and the whole place vibrated when the door closed. So there was no doubt that I was in jail. But it was more kind of an exciting thing. And the people who were in there were just like, you did what? What? So basically my time in there was spent telling my story to a whole bunch of strangers. And
oh, fantastic. Helping them pass their jail time in an interesting way.
Definitely. I'll bet there's one or two that probably still remember that. But yeah, it was
well, I was on remand in prison for 4 hours.
You were what?
On what they call remand, waiting in prison for your final sentence. So I was actually sent to prison, but only for 4 hours. Then I got bail.
4 hours? You did that much?
Yeah, I did a full stretch.
Yeah. I'll bet you should get on with Sean Atwood. He'd want to interview you. Actually, did you say you were working on a book? Have you?
Well, you know what? I did start one, but I really don't like writing about it, because it's something that has gone, and it went on for too long, and it was awful, and it Yeah. And also, I don't think I'm a very good writer about me anyway. I can't find the creative juice.
Yeah, I do all right at the writing, but
we've got, I didn't know, I have to upgrade to pro, or we only have 5 minutes left and it cuts the meeting.
3 minutes and counting. What do you have to do?
I was at 3 minutes. I haven't got my glasses on. Oh yeah, it is. We could switch to Telegram when our 3 minutes is up and do Telegram.
Yeah, but then we won't be able to record. That would be a drag because I never did get Bandicam going. StreamYard works. I think you can stream. I can send a link to you. Why don't you send me like something so we have a more direct contact, because obviously email is jerking us around. Okay, we're back. Cool. Yeah, so now you're over there. I've been looking at you this way the whole time. See what I titled it?
No, I can't see a title.
I had to counter your Beelzebub comment. It's, I titled it "Hackers from Heaven." So so there's some history behind that, and so you were asking about what the penalties were, and I had the jail time, I had the fine, I had 2 years probation. And the judge was also really kind to me with that, because I got a deferred sentence. So once the 2 years were up, since I had 2 years of good behavior, and then a deferred sentence means they wipe your record. So that's another reason nobody found out about what had happened. So I actually have a clean record, and I'm sure it's still there. If the intelligence agencies look something up, they'll find what they want. But so years later, I ended up, I moved to Italy as an exchange student when I was going to college for a bachelor's degree. And that's how I ended up in Europe, because I live in Spain now. I don't know if you realize I
didn't realize. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And so when I moved to Italy, I was there for a year, and then I had to go back to the States to finish my bachelor's degree, which I did, but I was just itching to experience more of Europe, and I was already fluent in Italian at that point, and so I thought, okay, I'll move back to Italy, and I had an apartment to stay in that was rented to me by my Italian teacher at junior college in Santa Barbara, and so I'm just gonna save the recording that we did, just finished converting. And
I sent you my side of it in Telegram. I'm not sure if there's any point in that, but
it's probably there we go. Raw. Okay, looks like it worked.
Lovely.
Well, good. Thank God for small miracles. All right, so what was I talking about?
Italy, rented apartment. Teacher.
Yeah. So I went back to Santa Barbara, and then I decided to just wing it and move back to Italy. I had a place to land. I had a bit of money saved. I sold my car. I sold my motorcycle and everything. I just left the States and figured I would teach English. I was already fluent in Italian, so I thought they're going to want a native English-speaking person with a bachelor's degree, and sure enough, I found work within about a week, and I was able to support myself without a problem for that first year. But then I got really bored of teaching English. I already knew English, I wanted to learn other languages, and so I sent out CVs to a bunch of different American tech companies. I got a list of tech companies from the embassy, and just randomly sent my CV to them. And then one day I heard back from IBM, and so they called me in for an interview. They were interested in having me for a tech writing position, and they didn't know anything about my past at all. I didn't mention it because I had a deferred sentence, and I thought IBM probably might not be so interested in having me if they knew if they knew my past, And yeah, so I ended up getting hired there, and they never asked, and I never disclosed, and so I ended up working for a year at IBM. That's just a funny little chapter in the whole story. But the other thing that happened was with my sentencing, they gave me 200 hours of community service. And so I just envisioned myself, I'd be picking up trash on the side of the road or something. I didn't know what kind of boring thing I was going to be doing, but I started to do the math. I'm like, 200 hours, that's like 40 hours a week. That's like a month, every day, all day, oh, it's going to be brutal, And then one day my lawyer called me up and he said, Judge Killian contacted me, and he was contacted by an organization called the National Coalition for Children's Justice, which was a private foundation that had been founded by a wonderful man, Kenneth Wooden, who basically the whole thrust of the organization was to try and come up with better ways of tracking missing children. And at that time, anytime a child was kidnapped or disappeared or something, if they were taken across state lines, there was no way in the structure of the laws at that time to even pursue the captors. Right. So it was just seemed the government's main approach to dealing with was to put their pictures on milk cartons, and that was it. Scare all the other kids, but not do anything about the ones that have actually been abducted. So it's really atrocious, and it's only gotten worse since then. When it comes to all of that. Wow. So he was watching the nightly news, or actually George Gallup was watching the nightly news, who was his friend. The Gallup polls. Yeah. And George Gallup talked to him, and they were just brainstorming, and they were like, we should try and get some of these kids and make use of their skills, and try to somehow set up some sort of a computer network for tracking missing children. And so he reached out to the judge and talked about this with the judge, and the judge was like, that's a fantastic idea, and just assigned the whole 200 hours to the NCCJ. Fantastic. And so then I get this call from the founder, and we start talking. We have this great conversation. He decides to fly me out to Vermont to meet with him, and asks if I have any other friends who might also have skills that might be interested in doing what was necessary to put some kind of a nationwide network together. And so the whole program was called Hackers from Heaven. Okay. and so that actually happened, and I ended up flying first to Philadelphia, and I'm giving away a lot of the parts of the story, but and meeting with a couple of my previous hacking buddies who remained anonymous, and then we took a train up to Vermont and stayed in their log cabin out in the hills. it was just an amazing experience, and so that was why I put Hackers from Heaven as a title.
And that was the same judge that did your sentencing.
Yeah.
Well, thank God you got a decent human being for a judge, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and I had a fantastic lawyer who really did great work, and then in the end, like when it was time for me to pay up, he gave me a deal that I couldn't even have dreamed of. So I lucked out in many respects, and have a great story to tell as a result. But it was kind of, there were some times there where it was was nothing at all like what you went through. I really feel for.
Oh yeah, but it's still scary and stressful.
Absolutely.
Of the relative magnitude.
Yeah. There was excitement, and then every once in a while it would come, the reality of my situation would come back to me, and I'd be like, oh, this isn't so exciting after all. This could go really bad.
Yeah, 20 years and 20 G's.
Yeah, I saw that 2.5 minute interview you did on RT. Fantastic. I loved everything you said. Regarding Julian Assange, and another hacker from heaven. Really, somebody.
McKinnon, who in 2012 had an extradition request to the US blocked by the then Home Secretary Theresa May. He welcomed the news but said that it wasn't the end of the road.
Although it's a great win, there were a lot. I haven't read the ruling yet in detail, but there were a lot of points that the judge kind of threw aside, and this did end up basically being based on his health and his suicide danger. But we shouldn't even be in this position. 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, the best part of 2 years in Belmarsh prison, all for telling the truth. He's not a criminal. Julian and WikiLeaks did their best to always ensure that they never put intelligent assets in danger. And it really has been journalism on trial, due mainly to the heavy-handed US authorities, but also exacerbated by this ridiculously imbalanced extradition treaty we have between Britain and America.
Well, you're happy about this. Are you relieved? Did you expect it to turn out like this?
No, not at all. I am really happy. I thought he didn't stand an icicle's chance in hell. I really didn't. And I was talking to a couple of friends at 9 o'clock this morning, and we really did not expect this. It's incredible. I mean, everyone should be happy, but we should remember that it shouldn't have got to this stage.
But you should be cautious, because the US say that they will appeal, so he isn't out of the woods just yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, I assume his team are now applying for bail so he can be a free man while the appeals process goes on. But obviously an appeal needs either new evidence, which would probably be a superseding indictment from Washington, or some kind of development in relation to existing evidence or circumstances. So I'm not really sure what kind of grounds they're going to come up with. And I don't think it will be successful given today's ruling.
But what next for him? Will he be a totally free man? Because there is word that he, of course, could face these charges, though, in a British court.
Yes, that's another possibility. It's really hard to kind of speculate on what will happen next. Hopefully he gets bail and he'll be able to fight the appeal, a free man, and no longer be in prison.
And of course, President Trump or Joe Biden, when he takes office, could issue a pardon to Assange. Do you see that perhaps likely?
I don't think it is likely. Biden's a warmonger, and I don't think he'll want to do anything kind for someone like Julian, who brings out all the dirty, murky secrets of that awful world.
You've just come from seeing Julian Assange in Belmarsh prison. How is he today?
Well, he's mentally and physically very weak. Let me be clear. I mean, he's destroyed. You can check the medical reports or what the doctor claimed before the UK court. He's living a nightmare, to be honest. You can even check the reports issued by the Special Rapporteur on Torture. He used the word torture. That's what he's living. So what I've seen today is a person that is living a real nightmare.
You describe a man who is both physically and mentally broken. Is there any sense that Julian Assange will give up, that he can't keep fighting?
No, he will keep fighting and make sure that the rest of his team, we will keep fighting for him. This is a case that started 12 years ago, He's been suffering this persecution for 12 years. When I met Julian, I didn't have a house. I wasn't married. I wasn't have a child. And now I have a house. I have a child. I've been married, I mean, my life was going on, and he has been living isolated for 12 years without any rights. What was the crime? Publishing truthful information. I mean, the US committed war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it is a duty for the whole international community to prosecute those crimes. So the journalist that published those war crimes is in jail, and the people that committed those crimes are not even under investigation.
Regarding Julian Assange and, another hacker from heaven, really, somebody who's been screwed more than any hacker in history. And,
big time.
And it's just, Are you familiar with Aaron Schwartz and his whole story as well?
Yeah, bloody awful. Yeah. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, so they always seem to get these awful hackers and, make them pay the price. But all those white collar criminals seem to go free year after year, and the corrupt politicians and the corrupt pharmaceutical and, regulatory agency people. It's like a big revolving door of disgusting filth that seems to be running our world.
Yeah, the beast system.
Yeah. It's so it's nice to know there's some good people out there.
Yep, there definitely is. It's literally a battle between good and evil, isn't it? This planet at the minute.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, we're all kind of undergoing spiritual warfare, I think. It's, there's the forces pitted against us and all of the different ways in which they're affecting our lives most people don't have a clue about what's going on.
They want us to be tiny units, and we're all audited, monitored, tracked, and yet we're the cogs and the wheels that make the wheels go around and drive the system.
Yeah, well, they're feeding off of our energy, aren't they? It's the Matrix, really. I mean, people think it's a fictitious movie. It's not. It's the reality that we live in, really. It's just
and girlfriend. Oh no, it's not girlfriend. That's okay. Sorry. Yeah,
no problem at all. So, when did your case complete?
2012. Yep.
2012. It went on for a full decade.
It's
nuts. And that's amazing. They were trying to extradite you and everything.
And they were playing dirty as well, and talking about the electric chair, talking about being prosecuted under military order number 1, threats to send me to Guantanamo. It was just
what is military order number 1? I've never even heard of it.
You get a secret tribunal where there's no press allowed, and it's basically a secret military prosecution.
Oh, that's convenient. It's all secret, and then they send you to a prison that people have heard of but know nothing about.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you for doing everything you could to fight extradition. And honestly, I'm shocked both with what you did and Assange that there haven't been pardons, but they need scapegoats, and their scapegoats have to be people that aren't actually helping them commit their crimes.
Yep, they love a scapegoat. I really did feel that at one point. It was like the poster boy for, just as you were. You're set up as an evil genius out to somehow profit or steal. You're a threat to everyone, and that's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that only went on for me for less than a year, but I can imagine that I heard you discussing, having severe depression, and I read on Wikipedia that for a number of years you weren't even allowed to leave the house after dark or something.
Yeah, well, I was on what they call police license, so I had to report to the police station every night, and I couldn't go out after a certain time. But the American authorities, the British lawyer working for the American authorities, requested that I sign on at the police station every 30 minutes. And it was a 30-minute walk from my house. So it's just ridiculous.
You mean you had to go to the police station?
Yeah.
To sign up, but every 30 minutes, and it's a 30-minute. Well, that's impossible. Yeah. So they're just like once a day or what?
Yeah, it was once a day. It was because luckily my judge in that first, because I had a few judges, was sensible like yours and said, well, he can't do that. That's ridiculous. And so it was just once a day I had to sign on at the police station. But at one point I did run away to a kind of a safe house in 2008 because it was looking really bad. And of course, then I wasn't signing on at the police station. And then you realize that this system is crap. It's pen and paper.
Because they didn't even notice.
Yeah, no one even noticed.
You're like, I was doing that for years.
Yeah.
Bastards.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God. That's just nuts.
Yeah,
no, just Kevin Mitnick just popped into my mind as well as another who got raked over the coals. I mean, they put him in prison for 5 years. Now, he was doing all kinds of stuff, and he was all over the place, and he was running them ragged, and he was monitoring the people that were trying to catch him as well. And, but at one point when they finally caught him, they threw him in solitary confinement because the prosecuting attorney convinced the judge that was involved with the case that he was so dangerous that he could start World War III by whistling into payphones and he could 2600 hertz, to the blue boxing technology. Are you familiar with that? That's where you can basically hack the whole telephone system. Captain Crunch, exactly. And so they had this judge convinced that he could just whistle things into the phone and be able to start, the war to end all wars. So all the prisoners had to have access to the telephones, because they get their, a call a day or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the only way that they could keep the other people having access and him not was to put him in solitary confinement. So they did that for like 9 months or something ridiculous.
My God. I guess he might have been kind of glad of that rather than being in general population and possibly coming across.
I don't think so. I think he started to lose his mind. I read his autobiography, and I remember it was pretty traumatic for him, the whole thing. But he was there for 5 years total. I think he was in on 2 different occasions. But
right.
Yeah, it's a long history of them doing this sort of thing and demonizing normal people who are a little more curious than they should be.
Yeah.
And and then,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
But it's a huge threat to them, isn't it? Because computer infrastructure underlies all their systems, and if suddenly,
yeah,
curious.
Well, I'm of the mind now. I think the Hackers from Heaven, title is perfect because I'm of the mind now that the system is so broken, hopelessly broken, that eventually all the screws are tightening when it comes to the surveillance technologies and what we're being subjected to, as we saw over the last couple of years. So, at some point, it's going to have to be some Neo type hacker from heaven that does, brings it all down in a way that makes life livable for the average person again, because, times are tough right now. And they'll fly into Davos with their private jets to tell us all how to live and try and convince us that we're the cause of climate change and and that we need to eat the bugs. And, somebody ought to start feeding those bastards the bugs.
Yeah, raw.
Actually, they've probably been living off of them for a while already. That's why their heads are so messed up.
Yeah, they've got cockroach juice-colored blood, probably.
Yeah, I'm not even sure they got red blood going through their veins, a lot of those people. But you would know more about that than I probably. You're the UFO hacker, right?
Yeah, alien clones.
Yeah.
Man.
There's
so,
something else there.
Okay.
No, I was trying to remember, but go ahead. You had something.
All right,
to say.
So what were you hoping to achieve when you did what you did?
Well, I mean, really the high-tech joyride was kind of the best description for it, because it wasn't until a few years after I got busted that I started to really wake up to how the system is really designed. And, and it's actually a book that my father gave me when I was 21 that called Behold the Pale Horse. You may have read it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got that at 21. That was 34 years ago that I read that book.
I was in my early 30s.
So you can imagine how that changes your perspective on things. And already so much of what was in that book on some levels was verifiable, not everything, obviously. There's all kinds of stuff about Area 51 and UFOs and, different secret programs that you just kind of had to take his word for it. But when it came to infrastructure and secret societies and symbology and the kind of stuff that the elite are, it's all riddled throughout everything they do. The stuff that they call conspiracy theories, it's not a theory, it's a conspiracy, because anytime you have groups of people that are in secret conspiring to control others, that is by definition a conspiracy. Yep. It's not a theory, because those societies openly exist.
Yeah,
so
totally.
people who have those knee-jerk reactions to that term conspiracy theorists are idiots, in my opinion. They've not done their due diligence. They haven't studied. They don't really have a clue about what's going on in the world. So, so I went through. If I had gotten that book back when I was a hacker, I would have been just like you. I would have been. My motivations would have been very similar. I would have been trying to like find out what the heck is really going on here. Can I find some proof of it? And I would have been a hell of a lot more cautious than I was, because I was just kind of like, loose and flying by the seat of my pants, but for me, it was really, I was such a future file, and wanted I wanted to have my hands on the latest and the greatest of the technology, and to see what it could do. And, my ultimate dream, which I never pulled off, was to get, infiltrate a Cray supercomputer,
Wow.
And this is before War Games came out. I got busted in '85. War Games came out in '83, and I was already hacking for a couple of years before War Games came out. So I was kind of like, when I saw that movie, I'm like, has somebody been following me around? This feels like my life story a little bit. And that was before I got busted.
Would you like to play a game?
Yes, greetings, Professor Falcon. So yeah, it was really, in fact, one of the reasons I got off so lightly was because when they confiscated all my equipment and they went through all my files, and they found user lists, and they found things that I had saved because I wanted to ensure my ability to get back into the system, because it's a conquest, you conquer the system, then it's yours. And then you go on to the next one, it was just like feathers in your cap, and I would even, I even saw myself as this kind of altruistic hacker that was like, I had dubious morals as well when it came to things like telephone fraud, and I engaged in a bit of credit card fraud with a whole bunch of rationalizations, that these are corrupt companies anyway that are exploiting people, and they've got insurance policies that cover all of their losses in fraud, so I'm not hurting anybody, so I might as well profit a little bit from it. So I found ways of justifying that kind of thing, but I would never go out of my way to screw somebody, a person, and so,
so you may have had a file in your system called cmaster.zip, the old credit card number generation tool. Oh no, that was later.
No, I didn't even know about that. That was later. Right, this is back in the days of carbons.
Right. Yeah.
So you could dig carbons out of the trash cans, and then they had to split the carbons so that when you pulled it out, it would lose those last 4 numbers or something, so that you didn't have the whole number. And then, later when the credit cards came, there were other hackers that got into minting the cards themselves, and getting embossing machines and stuff like that, so that they could print their own cards. And then something like what you're talking about would have been beneficial. But with the credit cards, that was really why they were able to get jail time, because they would never have had a hope in hell of getting jail time for me. So they didn't bring that up. It wasn't a part of my case. It was mentioned in the papers, but the reason they didn't want to bring it up, because they wanted the case to be entirely about hacking, because it was this new legislation, and they were setting precedent by putting me in jail. So I got off light because of it, but I also didn't get off light because of it. It's a paradox, right? So that was an interesting aspect of the whole thing. And then what was I talking about with getting into the systems? So they had, when they confiscated my equipment, there were different things that clearly made it obvious that I'd been in the system, And if it wasn't for, my little list of credit cards that I made use of to buy a little bit of hardware, I never did that much. But, I wasn't in it for very long. I wasn't doing that for very long before I got caught. So I'm sure my morals would have become sketchier and sketchier the further on it went. And I discuss all of those things in the book, because it's a coming of age tale, because there were different reasons I kind of had a little chip on my shoulder and, felt like I was entitled to things that I wasn't entitled to. So I think it's going to be a good story for younger people to read also. But
can I buy the book? Have you got digital copies?
I'm hoping in the next week to get a copy that is polished enough that I can create an author's advanced reader copy, and then I'm going to send it out to a half a dozen people or so, and I'd be honored if you'd want to read it.
God, this is excellent timing. This and all because of my interest in geology, and my main interest in geology isn't actual geology; it's this whole comet theory and Graham Hancock and Randall Castle and the.
I've got so much stuff I can turn you on to, because this is what I've been. This is the whole thrust of my life for the last 4 years. Has been all about this. Yeah. And I've got a lot of very close friends who are deeply, deeply involved in studying these things and uncovering stuff that you can't even begin to imagine.
Fantastic.
Things are far more far out than I ever could have believed they are. And that's saying a lot, considering where I come from and what I've been about. So, absolutely.
I do believe everything happens for a reason. So I was crossing paths.
Well, it was a total synchronicity that you reached out to me, because you reached out to me as a result of my YouTube channel, which has absolutely nothing to do with hacking. So that was, I recognized your name and I saw your face, and I'm like, why does his name and face look familiar? And I'm like, oh, he must have commented before. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And so I just immediately assumed that you had come across me on the Wikipedia page or something, and that you found me because of the hacking. And then it occurred to me, wait, maybe he doesn't even know about the hacking. And sure enough, you didn't. So that was the total synchronicity that of all the, my little corner of the internet, of all the people that, that you could have come across, it was me with my backstory. And so we'll have some fun conversations about this stuff. Not just my own research, but the research of other people who are close to me.